Manchester, and welcome to another edition of Girard at Large. I am your been here twice today host, Rich Girard. Thanks for tuning in. As you know, you can find us online at girardatlarge.com, and you can find us on Facebook and Twitter. Also, no, you can't find us anymore at Twitter because they allow the Taliban to tweet, but not Trump. How do you allow the Taliban to tweet, but not Trump? So you can find us at Facebook, Gab, MeWe, Codius, Minds, Tumblr, which one am I forgetting? Parler, and all those places. Also at Girard at Large or at some version of Rich Girard. And we encourage you to like us, follow us, and do whatever it is you do on all of those other sites so we can stay connected. All right, it's been a busy, busy week. As we get started here today, I want to note the loss of the 13 American servicemen and women who were, well, I think it was all men, who were trying to evacuate Americans from Afghanistan, from Kabul, and that disaster of a departure orchestrated by Joe Biden and the Wizards of Smart and his Department of Defense. This will go down in history as a national embarrassment from which it will take us an awful long time to recover. So we offer our prayers and condolences to the families and friends of those who lost their lives needlessly in the chaos created at the airport by Joe Biden, who has been wrong on every major and minor foreign policy issue during his entire time in public life and continues to be wrong as president of the United States. And this time, not only did it cost 13 American servicemen their lives, Marines, soldiers, sailors, it left untold numbers of American citizens behind in a hostile place run by a hostile government, along with thousands of Afghan citizens who served our country while we were there. Let's not forget the $60 billion worth of military equipment we left fully functional, operating, and ready to go. Now the Taliban has our Black Hawk helicopters and a whole variety of other aircraft and ground vehicles. You can bet the Chinese and the Russians, if they don't have that technology already, will have their hands on it soon. And the technological advantages that we have in armaments will soon be replicated thanks to the president of the United States, who somehow thought it was a great idea to get our soldiers out before and close a very functional and safe airbase that housed 5,000 very dangerous criminals out of Afghanistan. So here, surrender the base, pull out the military, forget, there are tens of thousands of people that you're supposed to evacuate, try to go back in, rely on the Taliban to provide security, evacuate almost everybody, and leave in shame. These are great times in America. So our prayers go out to all. There was a rally outside City Hall and city and town halls across the state last night, organized by Matt Mayberry. I did help promote it, but I was not able to attend, so hopefully that went over well. And earlier today, we we're here with Andrew Sylvia of the Manchester Ink Link. This was a debate that was supposed to be had. This is he called it a one-person debate. As you may know, the Manchester Ink Link did attempt to arrange a debate between myself, Victoria Sullivan, and Mayor Joyce Craig. However, I was the only candidate who said he would be willing to do the debate, and therefore there was no debate. So I am, at this point, the only candidate who has actually done the interview. And the questions came from members of the Manchester Ink Link readership. I have posted it to my YouTube channel. I have not yet brought it on to Facebook or into my website at Girard at Large or girardformayor.com. But if you find Girard at Large on YouTube and you're eager to see it, it just got posted, probably about a half an hour before I went on the air here tonight. But don't you worry, we'll be making it accessible. The questions were interesting. The interview was fun. I'm glad I did it. I thank the Ink Link for trying to arrange a debate. I thank the Ink Link for giving me an hour to answer questions from their readers. I'd like to also thank the Union Leader for their editorial last Friday, which mentioned that we have been willing to debate, assumed that one candidate was willing to debate, although there's little evidence of that, and putting it on the mayor to pony up, I guess, if you will. We did share that editorial at girardformayor.com. If you'd like to read it along with our commentary, that would be great. Also happening this week was an interesting story from the newspaper about crime. And I was not quoted in the story because the email that I got asking for comment was not seen until after the deadline. I wonder what happened to the days when reporters would actually follow up with a phone call if an email about a story with a deadline on it went unresponded to. I mean, it's not like I don't respond to requests for comment, right? So I missed the deadlines, but in reading the article, I was sort of thunderstruck by some things. Like, why would the police chief be organizing a ride-along with the mayor and a union leader reporter during an election year so they can brag about all the wonderful things they're doing with the money that the mayor gave them from the American Rescue Plan? Of course, they didn't talk about the $13 million they threw out the window on community health workers that are somehow supposed to allow the police to do their job better. I do question that because while everyone got all worked up over the 1,800 calls that these almost 1,800 calls, because, 10% of these calls did require a police officer, but they don't know that until the police officers show up. So good luck to those community health workers who show up at a call that should have a police officer but don't. But and everyone was all in awe of the 1,800 check condition calls that the police got in the first 6 months of the year. Of course, they didn't put those calls in context because the police department over that same 6-month period of time got roughly 77,500 total calls for service. So if you do the math, we're talking about 2% of the calls the police get are going to be diverted to these community health workers at a cost to you, the taxpayer. And yes, it is you, the taxpayer, because even though they aren't using local property tax dollars, well, maybe they aren't using federal tax dollars. I mean, what the hell? They just turn on the printing presses and print all the money they want and create inflation. But for this, we're going to spend $13 million over the next 3 years. And even saying that caused a catch in my throat. But that's okay. It's all part of the $30 million fiscal cliff that Mayor Joyce Craig has created for the city by using grant funds and one-time money to plug holes in the operating budget and expand, the operation of government by creating things like, 13 public health workers. Oh, how does that number 13 come about? Oh, yes, we need one for each ward plus one for the elderly. I'm not sure that the calls for service to the police department fall equally among our 12 wards. So, right there, that's political. But in any event, so we're going to start with the revaluation. Now, some numbers that have alarmed, and I think rightfully so, a number of people have been released finally by the city's Board of Assessors on the revaluation. A lot of people have been scratching their heads wondering where those numbers are. Well, they came out yesterday, and because people don't really understand revaluation and how it works and what it means to you and your individual tax bill, I put together a brief and simple PowerPoint presentation that will give you the math. And those of you watching at on Facebook Live, if you want to see the slides, because I can't really figures lie and liars figure. Yeah, you get that right, Jim. So you have to go to manchestertv.org to watch it live. And we're going to put these slides up starting now. This is going to teach you about revaluation, okay? Understanding revaluation. Why will your taxes go up? By how much will they increase? Adding the tax increase from the budget. Yes, it's very, very simple. Next slide, please. Okay. So the first thing you have to understand is we have to create a baseline. You have to know where you're starting to know what the tax increase by the new budget will be. So here's the math. Our current tax rate, not the one that was projected in the budget that went into effect on July 1st, but the one that we're currently paying is $24.66 per thousand of valuation. Okay. Our overall property tax base increased by a whopping 40%. So in other words, the tax base was roughly $10 billion before the reval. It is now $14 billion. Now, to calculate the tax rate, to figure out what the new tax rate will be based on last year's spending and the increase in the tax base, you have to increase the tax base tax rate based on the increase. Okay. Blech. To calculate the tax rate based on the increase in the tax base, you divide the tax rate by the increase. So in other words, $24.66 divided by 1.4. Why 1.4? Because it's gone up by a 40% increase is 1.4, or multiplying 24.66 by 140. That means that the new tax rate or the tax rate with the new base would be $17.61. So in other words, if we had the new tax base on the current budget, instead of being $24.66 per thousand, the tax rate would be $17.61. What that means is that's your baseline tax rate, and the new budget's increase in spending and taxes will be added to the $17.61 this fall when the tax rate is set. Bring it back to me. So what you need to understand is that any tax rate, when the Department of Revenue Administration sets our tax rate in Manchester this fall, any tax rate above $17.61 is not because of the reval. It is because of the increase in spending that is in the recently adopted budget. Okay, and that's important for you to know because since, dirt was new, politicians have blamed increases in spending and taxes on revaluations. So 20 years ago, when I ran for mayor the first time, there was also a revaluation. I actually took a full-page ad out in the Union Leader to explain to people, what the tax rate increase was as a result of the wild increases in spending that were hidden in the budget. So, all right, next slide. So this is what's got people all bent out of shape. Okay. Now remember, the overall property tax base went up 40%, but single family homes as a category. Now, these are categories. This doesn't mean everybody's home or condo or two family went up by these percentages, but it means the category did. So the category single family homes on average was up 46%. Residential condos were up 52%. Two families were up 64%. Lucky me. Three families were up 61%. 4 to 8 family buildings were up a whopping 76%. Apartment complexes, that's anything of more than 9 units, were up 57%. And mobile homes were up a mere 40%. So they were on par with the increase in the overall tax base. Now, for people who pay rent, bring it back to me. What you need to understand is that you pay taxes. So when values go up like that, the increase in property taxes that you will experience as a result of this is going to increase your rent. Rent, whether you like it or not, is a cost of doing business for a property owner. Just like, maintenance, repairs, renovations, utilities, insurances, principal and interest on the mortgages, that all gets factored into your rent. So when you see sharp increases in property values with likely sharp increases in taxes to come, you can expect your rent is going to go up. Okay, let's go back to the slides. So let me tell you how you figure out how to estimate your new property tax bill. Now, you can use the average of the category for the kind of housing that you have. Okay, that doesn't mean, again, your property is going to go up by that much. If the numbers hold, bring it back to me. If the numbers hold, a third of you will see your property go up by more than the category average. A third of you will see it go up by about the same as the category average, and a third of you will see it go up by less than the category average. So since it's impossible to do all those variables, we stay with the category average. So here, let's show them the math. Okay, so if your current, so the math is this: your current property value times the category increase equals the new value, then the new value times the new rate equals the new tax bill. So obviously we're going to give you examples on this. If your property is currently worth, we're going to do the single families first, okay? And don't worry, we're not doing this for every category. We're just doing a couple in each to show you how it works. If your property is currently valued at $300,000 as a single family, you multiply it by 0.2466. Why? Because the tax rate is $24.66 per thousand. So in 300,000, there are 300 thousands. So we could multiply 300 by 24.66, or we could multiply the whole value times the decimal representation of that, which is 0.2466. So your annual tax bill today is $7,398 on a $300,000 single family home in Manchester. So now we're going to take that $300,000 and we're going to multiply it by the 46% increase in the category for single families. Your new value, if you go up by the category average, will be $438,000. And I know some of you just broke out into a cold sweat. Okay, now that $438,000 to figure out, to estimate what your new tax bill will be before, remember this is before they apply the tax increase for the budget that took effect on July 1st. You multiply that by the new tax rate that you get when you multiply the current tax rate by the increase in the property tax value. So that's 0.01761. So your new estimated tax bill will go from $7,398 to $7,713.18. Next slide, please. What that means is your increase in taxes from the revaluation on a $300,000 single family home will be $315.18 or 4.26%. And again, that's before the budget. So if there's another 2 or 3% increase in taxes in the budget, then you're going to see that $315 go up even more. Next slide, please. Okay, this one's called two-family fun. So currently, if you have a $400,000 two-family times the current tax rate, you're paying $9,864 in taxes. Yup. So let's multiply that $400,000 times the 64% increase in value for the category average. That $400,000 two-family will now be worth $656,000. Multiply that by the tax rate adjusted for the new tax base, $17.61, and bang, your tax will go to $11,552.16. That's a $1,688.16 increase in taxes on that two-family. That's a 17.11% increase in taxes, and that's before the budget is figured. Jim says most upscale two-bedroom apartments are $1,800 to $2,000 now. Yes, they are. All right. No, so those two slides show the impact on a couple of residential categories, and every residential category, except for mobile homes, is going to see increases like this. On the low side, it's 4%. On the high side, it's actually more than the 17% I showed you on the two-family. Now, what's interesting here is that while residential properties skyrocketed, commercial and industrial properties did not. Let's go to the next slide. So We're calling this commercial crash, not because the values went down, but because they failed to go up sufficiently to keep pace with the rest of the base. So here's a commercial property. Commercial property as a category only went up by 14%. Okay. So if you have, a residential property, you're up at a minimum 40%. On average, that's the category average. And you're up as high as, I have to go back. You're up as high as, 76%. Oh my gosh. Okay. So let's take $1 million commercial property. At the current tax rate, it will pay $24,660 in taxes. Now, let's estimate the new tax bill for this $1 million property. We're going to take this $1 million property. We're going to increase its value by 14%. So we're looking at $1,114,000. Actually, I think I might have done that wrong. It should have been $1,140,000. Anyway, you'll get the point. Times the tax rate. That is a tax bill of $20,075.40. You're going to actually see a decrease. And again, I'm admitting I made a mistake. It should be $1,140,000, not $1,114,000. But that $26,000 difference in the value is not going to materially change the math here. But I am admitting my mistake. I wish I had caught it beforehand. $20,075 is the new tax bill. $24,660 is the old tax bill. So you are going to pay $4,584.60 less in taxes as a result of this reval, a decrease of 18.6%. Now, again, this is before the budget impact. So in this case, the additional taxes that will be paid because of the budget that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen passed will reduce the decrease in taxes. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Industrial properties, which interestingly enough is really the smallest major category that we have. It doesn't even break $1 billion in total. And I printed out some stuff, which unfortunately left on my desk. So I'll try to do it by memory. But industrial properties went up only 21% versus the 40% average for the city as a whole, and the wild averages of the residential categories. So again, we'll take $1 million industrial property, $24,666 in taxes. Yes, I know, Meg, there are no slides, but you have to go to manchestertv.org if you want to see the slides, because I can't show them on Facebook Live. So the 21% increase means the value goes from $1 million to $1.21 million times the new tax rate. The new tax bill will be estimated at $21,308.10. So industrial properties as a category average per million will see a reduction of $3,351.90 or 13.6% in their tax bill. Bring it back to me. So here's what this means. Okay, the city obviously is still going to collect the same amount of property taxes before the next budget tax bill goes out, right? And so what this means is the revaluation has fundamentally shifted the amount of money being paid by commercial industrial properties to residential properties. Residential properties now, it's a shift of about, in December, you may recall, I wrote an op-ed in the Union Leader about what I called the exploding cigar and what happened with the revaluation that the city went through in the 1990s, where there was a dramatic shift away from commercial industrial properties to residential properties. I predicted that was going to happen again, and I said it was going to be about 20%. And I was right, because there was about a 20% shift, and these are preliminary numbers, but there's about a 20% shift in the tax burden away from commercial industrial properties to residential properties. And it's important to note that that category called apartments, everything bigger than 9 units, all of our, Washington Park Estates, Colonial Village, Manchester Gardens, all of those big complexes, all the stuff that Will Soa has been running around the city, changing zoning to build, all of that stuff is actually considered part of the commercial tax base. And it's a little more than a third of the overall commercial industrial tax base. It went from about 1.1 billion to almost 1.8 billion dollars in value in this reval. So a significant chunk of our commercial tax base is actually apartment buildings. Okay, that's the way the state categorizes it. So that's the way we have to do that. But even though there was this massive increase there, because the increase in the the actual commercial and industrial spaces was so small that it still allowed for a shift of the overall tax base to the average residential taxpayer of about 20%. So let's pick up the next slide. On average, now, a third of you will see your taxes go up as a result of the reval. And, it works this way per category, and it works this way generally speaking, because this is just the way averages work, right? So a third will see your taxes go up, a third will see your taxes stay about the same, and a third will see your taxes go down because your property went up by more than, about the same as, or less than either the category average or the overall tax base average on its own. It depends on what I just said. Did it go up more than, equal to, or less than the overall tax base? Now, what's not debatable here? That's our next slide. Okay. Regardless of your individual situation, residential properties will bear a greater percentage of the overall tax burden. That's not debatable, because the value of residential properties went up substantially more than any other property type in the city. So the burden, the percentage of the taxes that come from residential properties is that much higher as a result. The increase in spending and taxes adopted by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen will be in addition to what happens to you in the property tax reval. Okay? Information out to vote supported the tax cap. I am still, yes. I agree, Craig. Share this video with people. That will help. So the increase in spending and taxes adopted by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen effective July 1st will be in addition to what happens to your property in the reval. Remember, the baseline tax rate at this point is $17.61. There will be some additional adjustments, modifications, and changes to that baseline number as they finalize the number. There's going to be an appeals process for people to go through and see, try to get their value adjusted because the appraisers got it wrong or whatever the case may be. But right now, with an overall increase in the property tax base of 40%, your base tax rate is going to go to about $17.61. So numbers still to finalize. It is subject to change, as I just said. So that, did I confuse everybody? 6403091. Numbers are hard to present. That's why I made the slides and tried to create the math so that you could follow along. And this is a real problem. Back in December, I said that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen is going to have to do something to mitigate the impact here. And clearly they didn't, because instead of using money, say, from the American Rescue Plan to offset expenses or do other things that would not add to operational expenses and create a massive fiscal cliff, they did exactly the opposite of what they should have done. Now, the question becomes, what can we do about this? Because, revaluations happen by law here, and there are two kinds of revaluations, right? There's a full revaluation where people go knock on doors and get to every house, and then there's the data updates on the information that they have. And every 5 years or so, we've been doing a data update because basically our data in Manchester apparently is pretty solid, and it stays within the margins that are required by the state before you have to go do the real big, knock on doors and check out people's properties kind of reval. But, ironically, about 20 years ago, when I was running for mayor, we had another one of these revals, and there was some serious sticker shock at the time. And I am now working to revive a proposal that I had back then about how to do this. And I'm going to try to share it with you at the moment here without having all of the details terribly fleshed out. But I want you to understand that it doesn't have to be every 5 years, and you don't have to get whacked this way. One thing you need to understand about how property tax systems work is there's something called an equalized valuation ratio. Okay. So a baseline gets set when you do a reval. And allegedly, when you do the reval, you're at 100%. In other words, the property assessments that the city has on record are equal to the market value of the properties in the city. And as time goes on, if property values go up, the equalization ratio goes down, right? So property sells for more and more and more year after year. The properties on the market are more expensive or higher valued than the properties in the city's record. So you get what's called an equalization ratio. And that's designed to make sure that people who buy property that's rising in value after the value has been set by the city aren't penalized for buying a property that's higher in value. If properties are coming down in value, which has happened in the past, that happened in the 90s, and it was miserable because the tax base shrank by a whole lot. Try doing budgets when the tax base is shrinking. I'll tell you, it will make what we're doing now look like child's play. I know, I was there. In any event, then the equalization ratio goes above 100. So if the equalization ratio is going above 100, that means the value of properties in the market is less than what the city has on record. So one thing that we can do is periodically or continuously assess a certain percentage of the property in the city on an ongoing annual basis. And if, say, 2 years from now, let's say, the equalization ratio falls below 80 or goes above, say, 115, then that could be a trigger to not wait another 3 years to do a reval, but to do it sooner so that you're not seeing these wild swings in valuation and wild fluctuations in the tax rate. It becomes a lot more manageable for you, the taxpayer, to avoid these types of sticker shocks when something like this happens. And it also actually brings some stability to the city budget because it will keep the tax rate relatively level. Okay, it'll stay within a certain range and a certain tolerance, and that will keep properties more or less in line with the data, with what the market is saying they're worth. Now, I'm digging on memories from 20 years ago when I worked with the late Steve Tellier, who was chairman of the Board of Assessors at the time. And if memory serves me, there will probably need to be staff added to the Board of Assessors office to do this and do it efficiently in-house. I will touch base with Board of Assessors Chairman Bob Gagney about this. I'm pretty sure it's still a viable option. But stay tuned to GirardForMayor.com because a proposal on this is likely forthcoming. It should not be the case where you see these types of fluctuations and variations in property values. It's a bitter pill to swallow. And when you're looking at people who are going to see their property value, their property tax bills go up, anywhere from 4 to 20% just for no other reason than the value of their property went up, that's one hell of a kick in the teeth, and it's not really a good thing to do to your property owners. So 640-3091 if you have any questions. That's 640-3091. Lots of activity on Facebook Live. So we'll take it from there. Okay. Now, ManchesterMayor.com. This is a site I brought to your attention last week. Somebody has put up a site to try to create momentum for a primary debate. One of the knocks on me for pushing this is, nobody ever debates in the primary. Well, I'm not sure that it's true that nobody ever debates in a primary, but it's been an awful long time since there were 3 contenders, if you will, in a primary. The last time I remember there being something like this was back in 1999, where Ray Wazorek ultimately lost to Bob Baines because there was a hot Democrat contest between him and Donna Soucy to try to topple him. Now, I honestly don't remember if there was a primary debate back in that day, but it's been that long since there was a, three name candidates that a debate would be beneficial to. So why Victoria? See, and it makes sense to me that Victoria would join me in calling for the debate, because that puts pressure on Mayor Craig to do that. And I would think as Republicans, we would want to do that so we could better energize Republican and independent voters looking for change to get out to vote. But no, we're all playing these games about, those are for the general election or whatever the case may be. I don't know why anybody running for office wouldn't willingly submit to a debate organized and, run by a third party. But there it is. ManchesterMayor.com, though, is a place where you can go, and it's a very simple website. There's no magic. You can see everybody who's asked a question. You can see everybody who's signed the petition but not asked a question. I think there are only 2 pages on the whole website. The one where you put in your name and your question if you want, and the other that tells you who signed it, first names only, and what questions were asked. So we're going to get to some of those questions now, because Dorothy in Ward 1 wants to know, how and why did Manchester become the new Lawrence? Ouch. I'm not sure how I want to answer that one, but I think, to be honest with you, I think safe stations had a lot to do with it. I think the illegally operating sober living facilities have had a lot to do with it. I think Mayor Craig failing to either crack down on those sober living facilities and certainly her refusal to deal with the homeless issue. I mean, she has dealt with the homeless issue, right? She fenced them in, gave them toilets, water, food delivery, police protection. I mean, that drew an awful lot of people here. Her insistence that Safe Station continue despite the obvious and unintended consequences to the city of Manchester. It wasn't all that long ago that she was saying that despite that, the real issue with Safe Station was the state wasn't giving us enough money to run it. So she wanted to continue to suffer the consequences of Safe Station so long as the state paid for Safe Station or paid more towards it, which I was really rather blown away when I read that. It just brings people in. And the other thing, too, is that, the city could do a better job taking care of itself, maintaining the rights of way, and then there's the poverty demographic, right? Lawrence is not a wealthy city and no longer is Manchester. Manchester used to be a solidly middle-class city, and we have lost that solid middle class to the suburbs. And the best indicator I have of that is the household median income in Manchester is only $60,000. It's $84,000 in Goffstown. It's $94,000 in Ware. It's $89,000 in Hooksett. It's $107,000 in Merrimack. It's some odd thousand dollars in Litchfield. It's $107,000 in Londonderry. It's $115,000 in Auburn. It's $100,000 in Candia. It's $122,000 in Bedford. The middle class of our city has moved to the surrounding towns. And Manchester is aggravating that by, this year alone, Joyce Craig's like, hey, we're spending $8 million to create more subsidized low-income housing in the city. Wow, that'll do a lot to provide middle-class housing. That'll do a lot to raise our average income. That'll do a lot to bring people who have resources and money to, provide the city the ability to take care of its, indigent masses. Build it and they will come. What are we going to do with $8 million more worth of subsidized low-income housing except attract more people who will live in subsidized low-income housing? And look, I'm not against, people who are broke. I have at points in my life been broke myself. And, I'm not exactly living in the North End at the moment, 3 kids in college and all that. But the fact of the matter is if you want Manchester to become part of what it, to resemble what it used to be, you have to have a focus on building the kind of housing that will attract middle class people. Those are single family homes. They have a little leg room for kids to run around and play. They have enclosed neighborhoods. We have some of those here. We need more of it, or we're going to keep seeing the middle class leave our city, and we're going to keep seeing poverty rise, and we're going to keep looking like Lawrence. All right, we have Barbara on the line. Barbara, thanks for calling in. You're on the air, Barbara.
Thank you, Rich, for taking my call, and thank you for all that you're doing to uncover this information and give it to us.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm really concerned because I saw the news article today regarding the tax reassessment, and I'm looking at the crime, just the crime in the city of Manchester and in my area, and what is going on, and the police presence and the gunshots and all that is happening, and then on top of that, I'm looking at these press releases that are talking about, free meals for students, whether they need it or not. Believe me, I'm all for feeding a child if they don't have resources or whatever. But this whole new system is going to give children free breakfast, lunches, and dinner, whether they need it or not. And it's coming. It's not free. It's coming out of us.
Yep.
And we've got to get a handle on this. Government is not in the business of charity. Yep. Charity is charity.
Well, yeah.
And so I thank you for all that you're doing, and I thank you for exposing what you're exposing here regarding the assessment values, because these people have come in, they haven't really looked at our neighborhoods. They've just kind of done a Zillow thing where they, look at it virtually. They have no idea what's really going on in Manchester, and people are going to be assessed and given huge tax bills. And it's not a good thing. So I really appreciate what you're doing on this, and I appreciate your foresight, and I'm going to vote for you for mayor for sure.
Well, thank you, Barbara. I appreciate that. All right. And so I want to sort of underscore something that Barbara said there, too, because in the door-to-door that I've been doing, I do it the old-fashioned way, folks. I don't go door-to-door with a list and only talk to people who vote a certain number of times over recent years, as if I knock on every door when I go into a neighborhood. And in doing that, I have found an awful lot of people who have moved into our city. And I asked them questions. Where are they from? A lot of them are from the Boston area. Well, why did you move up here? Because I wanted to get out of the city, or because real estate values here are so much lower than where I'm coming from. Of course, that's driving real estate values here up, but it's less than where they're coming from. And so there are a lot of people who are unfamiliar with the city. They bought because they were escaping somewhere else, and the housing here was cheap to, at least cheap to them. And I'm glad you brought up the free lunch thing. I got to tell you, that is unbelievably irresponsible of the school board. Now, before you think it's because I don't want to feed hungry children, that's not it. There was, before COVID, a process in place where people would, they would have to fill out a form to qualify for free and reduced hot lunch. State education aid, in part, is based on the number of kids who apply for and receive free and reduced hot lunch. So when that all went out the window during COVID, because they decided, like they're doing now, to give everybody free and reduced hot lunch, regardless of whether or not they needed it, surprise, surprise, parents didn't turn in the paperwork, so the number of kids who actually qualify couldn't be counted. And there was this big uproar because that food program during COVID was going to cost the city something like $4 million in lost state aid. Okay, the state came through and guaranteed that aid wouldn't be decreased because of a decrease in the number of kids receiving free and reduced hot lunch. So what's the school board do? They go and create a situation where you don't have to fill out the form again, and they're going to give everybody free food for the whole school year. Well, that's going to be a problem when the grace period on the aid from the state that's based on free and reduced hot lunch goes away. I mean, when even the administration is looking at them and saying it's a bad idea, it's a bad idea. But that's okay. We're going to have free buses for high school kids now, too. Really, do we believe that there is anybody in the city of Manchester who is not coming to school because they won't pay for, $8 for a bus ticket a week? And I know there are some people out there in desperate straits. I also know that they have cell phones and probably, I'm not going to, at some point, even people who don't have a lot of money need to prioritize what they spend their money on. And the more necessities that you absolve them of having to spend their money on, the more likely it is they will spend what little money they have more frivolously. I'm saying that as somebody who has worked for 20 years in financial services at people's kitchen tables to see what they do and how they do it and how they respond to A, B, C, and D. It's not a commentary on anything other than human nature. People will not spend money on things that someone else is willing to spend it on. I know when I was raising my now older kids, when they were little, I used to take them grocery shopping and it was, Daddy, I want this. Daddy, I want that. Daddy, I want this. Daddy, I want that. So Daddy got tired of hearing about it. And so Daddy said, okay, I'm going to give you all allowance. If you want to buy something, you have to bring your money to the store. And all of a sudden, they didn't want to buy so much. My son in particular was great. He'd look at the action figure and he'd look at the $10 in his hand and he'd look at and he'd keep going back and forth and eventually he'd put the action figure back. But on occasion they would ask me to buy it. I said, well, why do you want me to buy it? Well, because I don't want to spend my money. Well, if it's not worth your money, why is it worth my money? Well, I don't know. I just want it and I don't want to pay for it. Well, then you really don't want it, because if you really wanted it, you'd pay for it, right? Okay, that's the way this works. And then I taught my daughters about debt. They saw a stuffed animal that they wanted, and I said, did you bring your money? They said, no, but we have it at home. Okay, Dad bought it. When we got home, guess who didn't have the money? So Dad taught them about debt. And every week when Dad gave them their allowance, Dad took away a third of the allowance. I gave them like $3 a week. I took away $1. Why are you doing that, Dad? Because you owe me money. I paid for something that you didn't have money for, so you have to pay me back. Okay. And then when the $10 came up, the next week I took another $1. Dad, why did you do that? We paid you back. I said, no, you didn't. You owe me interest. What's interest? Well, that's the extra money I get because I gave you money and I couldn't use my money, because I gave it to you. So now I get extra money. I get interest for giving you money. It would be safe to say my kids are thrifty and debt averse to this day. But, the same principle applies to everybody. And we keep doing more. Frankly, I think the free food and the free money is just a way of trying to bribe parents to come back to school, because the great return of students that some people predicted would come when they opened their doors didn't happen. So they're trying to bribe people by giving them free stuff to come back, even though financially, in the case with the lunches, it's cutting off your nose to spite your face. Okay, Tom in Ward 6 wants to know, will you as mayor stick to the tax cap when negotiating the teachers union contract? Yes, and when I was negotiating the teachers union contract, that was a big sticking point. Anything and everything we did had to stay within the tax cap, whether it was with the teachers, the principals, the any union we were across the table from. We made that painfully clear. I will not agree to contracts that exceed the tax cap. That's why the teachers didn't endorse me. That's why the police unions didn't endorse me. That's why I probably won't get any union endorsements. What are you going to do about graffiti vandalism in Manchester? Great question from Greg in Ward 3. Clean it up quickly. I think too, and I think I might have asked this question last week now that I'm doing it, but I think too, the other thing we need to do is we need to start investing in coatings on these bridge abutments, on natural stone places and things like so that people tag these properties, you can just basically hose it down. The other thing we need to do is we need to look into ordinances that require private property owners to clean up the vandalism on their properties. I'll tell you one thing I've noticed going door to door. Well, I don't want to get into that right now, but it's it's an issue, and the less we. Oh, and when it comes to the state, I'm going to make a deal with the state. They can either clean up the stuff on the sound walls or whatnot. You know what I think we should do along the sound walls that keep getting tagged along 293 and whatnot? I think we should plant poison ivy all in front of the sound walls and let the ivy grow up on the sound walls. And I don't think anybody's going to be tagging it with poison ivy there. Do you? All right, maybe not poison ivy, but some sort of evergreen cover that, some sort of plant life, ivy, something that will take root in the walls and climb up them so that there's really nothing to tag. If they tag it, the leaves will fall off. If the leaves fall off, nothing will be there. But we need to start thinking creatively. So I'll make a deal with the state. They can either come down and they can clean the graffiti, or, as mayor, I'll send crews out there to clean them, and I'll send the state a bill for doing it. The state should not be held harmless for its failure to maintain its rights of way. Derek in Ward 7's got an interesting question. And if you have a question you'd like to ask me as a candidate for mayor, 640-3091, or you'd like to comment on any of the topics we've been discussing, let's talk about the 1,200 district-issued laptops that are missing. Yeah, I suppose I should check with Dr. Goldhart to see if there's been an update there, shouldn't I? We need to address mental health issue. Homelessness and school and opioid abuse are only symptoms of mental health is the cause. Definitely a big driver there, and I'm open to suggestion. Okay, Derek in Ward 7 has a very interesting question. Catholic schools help families raise their children to be both morally and mentally gifted individuals in a way public schools cannot compete with. Are there any candidates willing to commit to making private or Catholic schools more accessible to families? Well, I'm going to answer that this way and say that I support the education freedom accounts that the state has passed. Those education freedom accounts will give parents who would like to send their kids to Catholic school their state portion of education aid, right? Because we pay out state aid to school districts on a per pupil basis. And kids who don't go to a public school don't have any aid paid for them to their local school district. So the state, and I agree with this philosophy, the state is taking the approach that says we want to facilitate the education of every child in our state, not just the ones that go to public school. So the state created these education freedom accounts where the per pupil state aid that the state allocates towards public school children will additionally now be given to kids who go to non-public schools or public schools outside of their attendance district, say in another community. So I see the state facilitating the education of children that way as a smart thing to do. Now, as mayor of Manchester, there's nothing legally that I can do or any mayor can do to give money to students. I know Victoria Sullivan is out there. She wants to pay parents to not send their kids to Manchester public schools, which, aside from not being legal, it seems odd to me that you would pay people not to go to your schools. I see that as fundamentally different than the state enabling parents to choose from any available school they'd like by through the education freedom account. As mayor, my goal in creating a public choice system where the money follows the child will be to inspire the development of educational options that will provide unique educational opportunities that will draw kids to our schools. I think you have to have a functionally sound, educationally excellent public school system in order to be a viable community. I don't see the idea of paying people to send their kids to take their kids out of the public school. I don't see that as a viable way to build a good public school system. I just don't. The emphasis is in the wrong place. The emphasis is on moving people out rather than doing something to attract people in. So as mayor, I would not be willing to do something like that. My focus will be strictly on the creation of excellent options, which I explain in my plan to fix our schools at girardformayor.com. Is to have the system and the community organically create terrific public school options that will cause Manchester to be a destination place for families interested in a good education. Okay, Tammy from Ward 7 asks, boy, a lot of people in Ward 7 today. No, I'm going to skip on that one because Robin in Ward 12's got a better one. How do you plan to stop the massive overtake of lower income housing and high rises from monopolizing our real estate in Manchester? We need more tax producing income so the few paying middle class that are left do not carry the burden for the whole city. The city had a graffiti truck. Yeah. Okay. The guy retired and they haven't been using it. I'll have to look into that. Okay. So Robin's question in Ward 12 sort of strikes at the heart of what I call my middle class platform, right? We can't always and only be about low income housing. We just can't. Demographically, cities have to have balance. In cities that have demographic balance, meaning they have poor people, they have rich people, but they have a solid middle class in between the two. And arguably, taking a look at the income statistics, but also noticing that 2 out of every 3 of our kids are on free and reduced hot lunch, or qualify for it if you can even get the paperwork done anymore, tells you that demographically we have flipped in the wrong direction. So the way to cure that is to attract more middle-class families. And the way to do that is it's simple, folks. Build it and they will come. Build that middle-class housing. Build those middle-class neighborhoods. Replicate to the degree that you can those settings in the surrounding towns that, 46,000 people a day come from our surrounding towns to work in the city of Manchester. 46,000. And at the end of the day, they drive home to their suburban, their quiet suburban places where they're covered with trees or they get big backyards and there's some space between the neighbors. And that's what they want. We have areas of our city where that could be built. It's one of the reasons why I fought the zoning changes on Hackett Hill, where they've now built a couple hundred, high density multi-unit rentals. Why I fought the zoning changes down on South Mammoth Road. While I will fight as mayor, only I'll have a veto then. Similar changes where we're taking either commercial land or we're taking single family land and we're turning it into this high density rental housing. I'm sorry. Even if it's market rate apartments, which I'm not opposed to, if they're in areas that are already zoned for them, nobody looks at a 3-bedroom townhouse in a development of 225 of them or 155 or how many ever and goes, oh, honey, let's move here. Let's raise our children here. They have a great parking lot. I'm sure they have wonderful sound walls between the townhouses. Nobody does that. But, you take a look at a 3 or 4 bedroom colonial on, in the city, a 1/4 acre of land, maybe a third, maybe a half, something like that. And, you'll attract some of those people who've got money to pay property taxes to support the schools and the services. And you'll start bringing demographic balance back to the city. Because without demographic balance, the city will continue to decline. I'm sorry to say this to you folks, but that's just the reality. And not just the reality of a guy running for mayor. It's a guy that studied this stuff 30 years ago when he was in college as a political science major with an urban governance emphasis. There are patterns to these things. Manchester is not an anomaly. And if you don't want to follow the pattern, don't do what the pattern does. In any event, that's our show tonight. Thanks for the calls. I am your ever humble host, Rich Girard. Thanks for tuning in. Until next week, be good, be well. Don't do anything we wouldn't do. We're proud of having the audience. Thanks for being there. Get to manchestermayor.com, sign the petition, ask your question. We'll keep answering them here. That and so much more. Until next week, be good.